We'll start off by looking at a short film on sample for the coliform. Okay? By that time, everybody has followed in. We'll also start generating or sending around this form, so if you will, we wish you for the evening, Thursday. Ready?
I turned on the.
Okay.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So it's recorded that way? I can't see.
Sampling, testing, and analyzing. Water professionals continuously monitor drinking water quality. Water suppliers regularly test for chemical, radiological, and biological contaminants. This video focuses on microbiological monitoring. It will explain why accurate sampling is crucial. It will describe what a sampling plan is, and it will demonstrate the procedures for collecting samples. Accurate sampling techniques and well-managed monitoring processes are essential to providing safe, clean drinking water. Welcome to routine coliform sampling for water systems. I'm Norman Moses. Untreated water often contains microorganisms. Most of them are harmless, but some microorganisms can make people sick. They're called pathogens. Most pathogens found in water originate in fecal waste of humans and warm-blooded animals. So if fecal material enters the water system, the disease-causing organisms can too. Here are some of the ways water can become fecally contaminated. By an improper cross-connection, by an inadequately protected well, by a septic system failure, or by runoff that washes fecal residue into rivers, lakes, and other water sources. So water providers monitor the finished water to make sure disease-causing organisms don't reach customers' taps. Testing for individual pathogens isn't practical because exams for specific organisms are difficult and expensive. A more practical approach is to examine the water for what are called indicator organisms. The coliform group of bacteria, also called total coliforms, is an ideal indicator in drinking water. Coliform bacteria is easily detected. When it's found in water, it's assumed pathogens are present too. The presence of coliform bacteria is strong evidence the water may be unsafe to drink. That's why accurate sampling is imperative. It tells us if total coliforms are present. These samples are an integral part of the effort to protect public health. Coliform bacteriological sampling is governed by the Total Coliform Rule of the Safe Drinking Water Act. The Total Coliform Rule, or TCR as it's commonly called, requires all public water systems to collect samples and have them analyzed for total coliforms every month. The rule specifies the minimum number of samples that must be collected. The TCR also requires every regulated water system to prepare a written sampling plan. That plan should include 3 items. One is the number of samples to be collected each month. To provide adequate monitoring, this number may be greater than the minimum required by the TCR. 2, the plan should state how often samples will be collected at each sample site. And 3, the sample plan should include a detailed description of each sample site. Sampling sites must be selected carefully. There are 2 primary considerations. 1, the sites may be representative of the different water sources entering the system. And 2, the sample points must be representative of the actual conditions throughout the distribution system. All conditions that affect the microbiological quality of the water must be considered in the sampling plan. For example, identify low pressure zones, locations of deteriorating mains, areas of low velocity water movement, loops and dead ends, storage facilities, cross connections, and varying population densities. Again, choosing sample sites representative of conditions throughout the water system is vital. Once sample sites have been located, specific sample faucets must be selected. Acceptable faucets can often be found in schools, fire stations, libraries, and other municipal buildings. Other options include faucets in homes of water utility and municipal employees. Faucets inside the homes of other consumers can be used too. Examine the faucets carefully. Here are some things to look for. The faucets should be on lines connected directly to the main. You want to eliminate problems associated with customer plumbing. If possible, avoid outdoor faucets. If you must use an exterior faucet, make sure it's not too low to the ground. If it is, contaminated soil or water may be on the outside of the faucet. A sampling faucet can't be close to a sink bottom. It's hard to place a sample bottle under a faucet that's too low. And if the interior neck of the bottle touches the faucet, the sample quality is compromised. Only cold water faucets should be used for sample collection. Don't use swivel-type faucets that have a single valve for hot and cold water. Avoid leaking faucets. Don't use faucets with threads. They usually don't provide a smooth flow. Faucets that point upward are not suitable. And don't use faucets in janitorial supply areas or commercial sinks. The risk of bacterial contamination is too great. Don't use faucets connected to home treatment devices, including water softeners. Drinking fountains are unacceptable. And avoid faucets with aerators. If you must use a fixture with an aerator, remove it before collecting the sample. Selecting the right faucet is a big part of putting together a sampling plan. Remember, a bad faucet may mean a bad sample. To avoid some of the pitfalls of using conventional faucets, many water suppliers install permanent sample taps. They can save time and money, and they can improve quality control. The City of San Diego Water Department collects thousands of water samples every year. Year after year, too many total coliform samples were testing positive. As it turns out, they were false positives. That means the test results indicated a presence of bacteria, but the water was actually bacteria-free. San Diego Water was never in violation of the TCR, but it was spending too much time, money, and effort on resampling. The sample locations were schools, libraries, and community centers. Water was collected from drinking fountains and bathroom and kitchen faucets.
One of the problems with those kind of sample points is a drinking fountain does not have enough pressure to push the water through so that you get a good sample. So you always end up collecting a sample from which has been sitting in the pipes. And two, the bathroom kitchens, most of the time the water will splash from the sink and into your sample point, causing contamination. So we end up with a bad sample.
And bad test results. There wasn't anything wrong with San Diego's drinking water. Just the same, there's a price to be paid for flawed samples.
When you get a positive, you have to go back out and sample upstream and downstream. You're wasting a lot of time and energy and money because you're getting false positives. You've been forced to report to the community that this water is contaminated when in actuality it's not. Going to public notification creates a panic in the community where they feel their drinking water is not safe for them to use for cooking, brushing their teeth, or drinking. It just creates chaos.
So San Diego Water overhauled its sampling program and constructed dedicated sampling stations at each sampling site.
They were taking water samples from inside the library. What was happening is they were getting a lot of false positives. So we decided to install sample stations right here on site. We decided to tap in before the water meter and go to the sample station. I tapped in to the 2-inch, went under the sidewalk, and went up here and installed the shell here. with a gooseneck and a valve. And you close the cover, lock it up, and it's secure. So kids can't get into it or it can't get contaminated in any way.
And the dedicated sampling stations are working.
Because we went to establish sampling points, we went from about 5 positive samples a week to 0 samples a week.
So sampling stations are a great investment for San Diego Water, and they can pay off for smaller utilities too.
What I would advise small systems to do is to establish good sampling point. Establishing a sampling point is not that expensive, and once you have an established point, you minimize the risk of contamination. It's just invest a little bit, it will save you a lot of headaches.
There are many variations of dedicated sampling sites. Make sure yours is convenient, secure, and reliable. Keep in mind, in some climates, you may have to build in freeze protection. Improper sampling is one of the most common errors in water quality analysis. When a sample is analyzed, the results show what is in the sample. So if mistakes are made during collection, the results may indicate contamination where there isn't any. Routine coliform sampling requires utilities to follow proven methods that yield representative water quality samples. The key is getting back to the basics of sampling. Phoenix, New York is home to about 2,500 people. Most of them never gave their drinking water a second thought, until a couple of years ago. That's when sample after sample from the distribution system tested positive for bacteria.
There was a day where we actually had to call the principal and have him bag the drinking fountains because of the positive E. coli. It was not confirmed after that, but to be safe. So the awareness level in the community was quite high about water issues. And they wanted to make sure that the water quality is good.
One of the town's 2 wells was shut down, but the problems continued, so the investigation continued. Health officials examined the way the water system was operated, including sampling procedures.
We cannot protect the public health if we cannot determine if the problem is really in the distribution system or in the well itself, or whether it's just sampling error. So it's very important to make sure that the sampling is done properly so that we can make a determination on risks.
Poor sampling procedures were part of the problem, and so were some of the sample sites around town. They were poorly maintained, and they probably contaminated some samples.
The water may not be bad, but the instrument it comes out of could be dirty, and it'll give you a positive reading and a heartbeat. You have to resample, it takes a lot of extra time and money, and you also, if you get too many of them, it leads to a lack of confidence in your system and in your operators.
That confidence is being restored today in Phoenix. Water quality and monitoring procedures are improved. The message here is there's no substitute for good fundamentals.
The other thing for any operator, no matter how long you've been there, don't get lackadaisical with your work. Believe me, and once it happens, you're not going to like the consequences. If it happens enough, you're going to get a violation. And you're going to bring the whole world down upon yourself. And you're going to lose consumer confidence. So don't get lackadaisical in your work. Do the steps properly every time.
Let's look at the step-by-step procedure for collecting total coliform samples. First, assemble all of the sampling supplies. Many different sizes and types of sampling containers can be used for collecting coliform samples. The laboratory that will test the sample usually provides the container. Most labs supply a sterile 125 milliliter plastic bottle. You may use glass bottles, but they're usually avoided because they can break during shipping. A dechlorinating agent is used when sampling chlorinated waters, such as those in the distribution system. Next, go to the sampling location specified in the sampling plan. The sites must be accessible during the day. And again, these sites should provide representative water quality samples. Third, make sure the faucets or taps are in good condition. They should be clean, free of attachments, and in good repair. If there's an aerator on the faucet, remove it. They can harbor bacteria. The next step used to be a common practice. In the past, samplers might spray the tap with a chlorine solution or wipe the faucet with alcohol. or flaming it with canned heat or a butane lighter. But this isn't recommended anymore. It doesn't kill attached bacteria, and it's not necessary if the sampling tap is selected carefully.
Now open the cold water tap. Monitor the temperature and let the water run until the temperature stabilizes. It's also important to clear the service line, so let the water run for 2 to 3 minutes. It's a good idea to time this step. While you're waiting, fill out the label, tag, and lab form using waterproof ink. Now adjust the flow. You want a stream that's about 1/8 of an inch in diameter, about the width of a pencil. Check for steady flow and don't change the water flow once you have started sampling. That could dislodge microbial growth.
Now remove the bottle cap. Hold it threads down. Be careful because the cap can be easily contaminated. Don't touch the inside of the cap. Don't set it down or place it in a pocket. A contaminated cap can contaminate a sample. Don't rinse out the bottle before collecting the sample. And be careful not to touch the inside of the bottle. Position the sample bottle under the flow with your other hand. Fill the bottle to the shoulder, about 1/4 inch from the top. Then place the cap on the bottle, tighten it. Turn the tap off, and replace the aerator.
Now check the information on the label. Complete any additional forms that came with the sample bottle, including the chain of custody form.
Total coliform samples must reach the laboratory within 30 hours of collection. If the laboratory is close by, drive the samples to the lab. If not, send the samples overnight.
Samples should be refrigerated or iced. They should be kept cool, between 4 and 10 degrees Celsius. All samples are to be analyzed the same day they arrive at the lab.
If a sample arrives at a lab on a weekend and isn't processed within the required time, it will be rejected. So collect and ship bacteriological samples early in the week. Also, it's a good idea to collect total coliform samples early in the month. Then, if something goes wrong, there's enough time to resample.
Water is treated for 2 reasons. First and foremost, to make it safe to drink. The second reason for treating water is to make it aesthetically pleasing. To ensure they are reaching those goals, water providers must monitor water quality. An organized, efficient, and effective sampling program is a big part of a water supplier's effort to provide safe, clean drinking water.
How many of you all in here have to collect those monthly samples? Good. Should be at the bottom, Jay. Did they get it right? As far as proper sample collection? Do you all go in the house or outside of your customer's home for your distribution samples?
We'll go all different places.
Different
So,
places?
no private libraries.
No private, you don't use private homes whatsoever?
No.
Okay. So you all have sampling points?
Well, we don't have any sample stations, but we have sample sites all around the county.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. Well, the total coliform rule, yes, I should go through the terminal objectives and enabling objective first. This is module 12, and we should be able to talk a little more about the total coliform rule, define what's in it, and what happens if those samples come back positive. What steps are we now bound to take? So we'll discuss that. We're going to look at the regulatory overview of the coliform rule, as well as identify various methods for total coliform compliance. Now, as the film indicated, who all must collect total coliform samples? Who must collect them? Which types of systems? All public water systems. You're absolutely right. All public water systems. So we're looking at community as well as non-community. And the reason behind it is because there may be a possibility of bacteria, parasites, viruses. All of those entities may be in our drinking water or potable water. And if they are in the drinking water, we need to be aware of it so we can alert the public to let them know they need to do some additional things to their water, such as boil their water or find an alternate source while we rectify the problem. Now, do we test for all possible pathogens? All of those diseases that may be there, pathogenic organisms? No, it's almost impossible. When you look at doing that amount of testing, you're looking at so many very, very, very deep pocket. And so we don't test for all, but we look at one particular group, and that's the coliform group. Now, with the coliform group, we have the fecal coliform, but we also have the ones that are non-fecal, the ones that are naturally occurring, the ones that are in the soil, in water, on a natural basis. And so we're going to run both of them. Now, the fecal coliform, of course, will come from the warm-blooded organisms or the intestines of the warm-blooded organisms or humans. Birds of a feather flock together. So, when there is coliform and it is fecal in nature, then there is a possibility that there is a risk of disease. The reason we say a risk because we don't know for sure if any other pathogenic organisms are there, but it gives us an indication that there may be a risk. Only a risk because unless the intestine is infected, there is no disease. Okay, so there is a risk. All right, the coliform rule established the legal limits and health goals for the presence of total coliform and for the fecal coliform. What do you think the goal is? Zero. Absolutely. The goal is to have nothing because anytime you have any of these organisms in the water, then there is always a risk. So our goal is zero. But EPA has established a limit for the amount that can be present there. The coliform rule also specifies the details of the frequency of testing. And for most public water systems, you're looking at a monthly basis. And is it applicable to all public water systems? The answer is yes. Why? Because we're providing potable water that is free of all pathogenic organisms for the public for use 365 days or at least 60 days out of the year. And because that it is applicable for human consumption, it's applicable for all water systems. Again, EPA goal is zero. Who knows what the established limits are, though? That was one of the things that was on the pretest. 5%, no more than 5%, okay? Any level will indicate some health risk. The legal limit, systems must not find coliform in more than 5% of the samples taken each month. Meaning, if I have a system and I take 40 or less samples, more than one positive, I'm in violation. If I have more than 40 samples, 5%, over 5%, I'm in violation. Okay. So greater than 5% is a violation, and that must be reported to the state. Not only are we reporting it to the state, but as the film indicated, that's when we also go into the public notification. Question. I have a total coliform that's positive from my distribution system. Go back within 24 hours and get my repeat sample. I have another from the same site that is positive, but again for total coliform. Is it an acute risk?
Yes.
I heard yes, and I saw the head shake no. Okay, Greg, why do you say no?
Because you should probably go to a different test site.
Oh, so for my retest, I can go to a different test site?
I would.
You would? All right, and we'll clear that up there too, because we want to make sure that we're following the letter of the law. And when we retest, one of the stipulations is we must go back to that same site as one of our retest samples. If I have more than one routine sample, for every positive, I'm collecting 3 repeats. One from the original site, one within 5 connections upstream, one within 5 connections downstream to pinpoint where the error is. All right, Mr. Tom says, yes, it is an acute. Why do you say it is?
Well, you gotta test the same spot, if you come up with the same violations the second time,
Okay, and this is what we will find out. Remember when we're doing the coliform
Now, why
testing
go upstream and
and
downstream?
downstream?
So,
Cool.
You
Yes.
didn't do that the first time.
No, we don't do it the first time, and that's why we're trying to understand the rule.
And if you don't do it the second time,
Yeah.
for what?
The whole purpose is to determine whether or not the site is the issue or whether or not I have an issue with my
That's what I'm
distribution
saying. So they wouldn't
system.
say there's acute
Yeah.
if the site's the issue.
All right. What makes it an acute risk? If there is fecal contamination in the sample. Remember the total form group, there are 2 types of bacteria we're looking at, the non-fecal and the fecal. If it's just a positive total coliform, non-fecal in nature, we do not look at that as an acute risk. There is concern. We still have to notify, but we don't go into immediate notification within the 24-hour period. That's the key. Any combination where there is fecal contamination, be it if we're looking at E. coli, we have a positive total, positive E. coli, or positive fecal, that's an immediate action, 24 hours notifying the state, within 24 hours notifying the public. Because now fecal contamination is in that sample, and that's where, again, that health risk becomes very, very serious. But as long as it's not fecal, it's of some concern because there's still bacteria in the water sample. Now that falls under the tier 2, and we'll explain that as we go along.
and
So-
aren't you better off erring on the side of caution than have to go through a notification? I mean, if you've done a notification, you know it's no pleasure to do that.
Yeah. And now, if that is the policy of your system, then definitely you will do whatever the policy of your utility or system is. All right, so regulatory overview, the actions taken to eliminate microbial contamination may be something as simple as repairing the disinfection. You saw several scenarios where they were getting all these positive. They went out and actually put in additional sampling sites so we can take out of the equation the customer's plumbing or what have you, being the issue. So you can repair, you can look at different various types of filtration equipment, flush the lines. Okay, it could be that there may be something lodged among the faucets. And I know the film says that now if you've selected your site perfectly or correctly, you should not have to flush or disinfect or anything like that. But in some cases, flushing or opening up to make sure you got water coming from the main, that's one of the things you want to ensure that you're doing. It may entail upgrading the systems or enacting a source water protection program. In other words, we're going to go back, we're going to pull from the source water to see if the problem lies with your source water rather than the distribution system. Now, actions to be take to eliminate microbial contamination. Anytime there is a positive, you must collect the repeat set within a 24-hour period of the positive. And they must be collected on the same day or within 24 hours. Now, for every positive, if I have one routine sample, look at me on page 12.4 and 12.5. If my system serves 25 to 1,000 people, there is one routine sample that I must collect per month. And if you look on page 12.5, if that one routine sample comes back positive, how many repeat samples am I pulling? For that positive, 4. Okay. If I have more than 1,000 people, and I'm collecting more than one routine sample per month, Then my sample set that I'm collecting within 24 hours of a positive is how many samples? 3. So for every one positive, 1 routine sample, 4 repeats. If I have more than 1 routine sample, I'm collecting 3 repeats for that 1 positive. Make sense? Rich like, I don't know. So look at population. The number of samples collected will be dictated by your population. 1,000 people, all the state or EPA requires is 1 routine monthly sample. Okay? If it comes back positive, now I have to collect 4. I'm going back to the original site within 5 connections upstream, downstream, and maybe another point within there also for that 4 sample. Or the other thing that I can do if I'm collecting 4, I can collect all 4 repeats from the same tap on the same day. Or I can collect the 4 sample on different days. Each successive day.
Okay, so you get four samples from the same tap. Suppose they all pop.
If they all pop, now again, I'm into that situation where I have to retest, and I'm taking 5 more samples the following month, and I'm following up with the public notification also. Absolutely. And I may be thrown into corrective action at that point, especially if they all come back positive, as opposed to 1 or 2 of it. If I have more than 1,000 people, that's where I'm collecting 3 for every positive that I get. Okay, understand? Make sense? Good. Now, I'm going to analyze for fecal coliform or E. coli, which is more specific for the human intestinal waste. If I get a positive on the E. coli, it is considered an acute risk, because now I know there's some type of fecal contamination in the sample. And that puts me under the tier 1 notification. So what determines the number of samples pulled? The population. Can you pull more numbers of samples than the population dictates? Yes. And in some cases, people do, to make sure that they are never, more than that 5%, they'll pull additional samples. If you pull additional samples and you're using approved method for pulling those samples, for running those samples, do you have to report them? Absolutely. They now become a part of your rules that you do on a monthly basis. Absolutely. So you must report them if you are using approved methods. So the first thing you want to do is to develop the sample siting plan. Again, it's based on the number of people in your system, how many samples per month you're going to pull. I'm from the Houston, Texas area. We have well over 2 million people. We're pulling 480 samples per month. Now, if we had, let's say, 100 positive, how many repeats are we pulling?
300, no?
Absolutely, very good. You got
For
it.
each one?
3 per, each one. That's why he said 300. Absolutely. All right. So, you collect a set of repeat samples to assess the extent of the problem, and the following month we will follow up with 5 routine samples. If they all come back negative, then you can say, you can go back to your regular schedule at that point. So the number of repeats, less than 1,004, greater than 1,003. And remember, we're going to pull these repeats, and this diagram is in your book. We're going back to the original sample site. We're going within 5 connections upstream, within 5 connections downstream. Now, if a 4th repeat sample is required, the system should take the sample wherever it feels it will help identify the area of contamination. Now, what's an MCL, maximum contaminant level? What does that mean? We said the maximum contaminant level goal was 0, So what is meant by maximum contaminant level?
Legal limit?
It is a limit, absolutely. And EPA sets that limit as close as possible to the goal. The goal is the number in which no health risk is associated with that. The limit is a number where there may be a possible health concern or risk. And usually the limit or level is usually set as close as possible to the goal. And in this case, it's 0. So what constitutes an acute maximum contaminant level goal or limit is any total form positive followed by E. coli positive. And when we have that scenario there, you have 24 hours or as soon as possible to notify the state. Now, in order to run these samples, you must utilize a certified lab in which they're making the notification also. Then you have 24 hours to notify the public. How are we going to notify the public? Because now it's an acute risk. So you want to make sure that you are getting a delivery method where the public can be notified within a 24-hour period as soon as possible. So usually you can use the media, television, radio, what else? You can direct hand mail it, you can post it in conspicuous places. So there are a lot of different methods you can get the message out there.
In the state of Rhode Island, they have to know 911 reverse.
Say that again, 911 reverse?
reverse, where they, instead of you call the 911, they call you and tell you there's a...
And that was one of the methods earlier, I think, day before yesterday, a gentleman brought up, is that what you all do here?
No, but they're starting to implement it in the state of Rhode Island now.
Okay,
I
excellent.
believe you can do it in this county now. I think it's already all set. Because
Excellent.
of the problem we had a couple of years ago.
Excellent. So how do you all work that when there's no landline? Website, and that was another option that was out there and that people are kind of, tickling around with as for, but keep in mind with acute, we want to make sure that we are reaching the masses of the people as soon as possible. In order to tell them what, and usually it comes out in a boil water notice, they need to boil their water to a rolling boil 1 to 2 minutes for drinking, or if you're going to use it for cooking. All right, as far as sampling, exceedance for monthly MCLs is a total followed by a total. And so in this scenario, it will fall up under the tier 2s. In other words, I have a positive total coliform, and my repeat is also positive total. Now it's not a serious health risk because there is no source of fecal contamination in that sample. When I have a positive total, followed by a positive total, EPA says, now I have 30 days to notify the public. I'm still notifying my state agency within 24 hours, but I have 30 days to notify the public. And you can use the same means of notification. What does your state say as far as your tier 2s? Does anyone know? Is it a 30-day too? Because some states are more strict. Texas, for instance, says, 30 days is too long, we have 14 days. But I'm not sure about Rhode Island. Not sure how many, okay. And some states just, adopt whatever the EPA says. I know Delaware is more stringent. They do a 14-day here for tier 2s, and they do a 3-month, 90 days for the next step down. But keep in mind, you still have to collect those 5 routine samples the following month. Don't get away from that. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? Can you collect a positive sample and ask your state agency to invalidate the sample? Let's say the first one was positive, you do your repeats, they all come back negative. Can I go beg the state now to take this off my record?
Yeah, only if they like it.
Only must prove what? That it's not representative of your distribution system. It was not a representative sample. Why was it not a representative sample? You have to do your investigation and have a valid reason as to why. And in the film, again, you saw a lot of different things that could go wrong. It could have been a sampling error.
Drop the
I'll be able to
cap.
show that. Huh?
Drop the cap.
Drop the cap, absolutely.
Drop it on the ground.
Yeah, and picked it up and just screwed it back on there. Could have gotten their hands in the water. A lot of things could have gone wrong. Okay? So samples can be invalidated if all the repeats are negative. Now there's also a situation where you can request reduced monitoring, and that is if all your samples have always come back negative. In some cases, you can put in a request and go from monthly samples to collecting quarterly samples, okay? But you must request that. All right, you may want to put together monthly monitoring worksheets. This is sort of a plan to keep you straight. It helps to ensure the right number of samples are collected. For instance, if your system must collect 15 samples per month, and for whatever reason, let's say Sally Sue is on vacation and Joe Black comes in and collects for the next month, he collects 14 instead of the 15. Is that a violation? Yes. But if I have sort of like an SOP or worksheets to keep me on track, then I know how many samples are required each month, and I won't fall into that situation of violation because of that. It also helps with the organization of the samples, keeping up with how many repeats, because remember all those repeats must be collected within 24 hours, as well as any follow-up that I need to do. Failure to report it to the state is a violation, and again, you don't want on their bad side by failing to do that. So make sure, have a worksheet, SOPs. Been there, done that?
Not too late.
Not too.
No, we're on the state's bad side.
All right, so my sampling siting plan must be written. Now, where you choose the samples are very important. Can I choose all my sampling points right next to my water treatment plant or production site? Why not? I know that they'll all come back good. It's not representative of the system. So if you have a loop system, you want to take into consideration your loop system, make sure it's representative. If you look on page, what page is that? 1213, it'll give you some ideas of making sure that it's representative for loop system, for your conventional non-loop systems there. You want to make sure, again, take into consideration your main sizes, your dead ends. All of that should be taken into consideration. You want to make sure that it is from an active site, a site that is being used. If the water is stagnant in the pipes, there's no chlorination in that area because, again, chlorine will dissipate over time. If you're using chlorine, then there may be a possibility of coming up with a positive sample. So an active site is a representative site, taking into consideration, again, your entire system. So that means I need to review my distribution map and choose my sites carefully. I must also submit the addresses to the TCEQ. I say TCEQ because I'm from Texas. You're going to submit them to your state agency, as well as alternative sites for submittal. So take into consideration all of those, the location of your water sources, treatment facilities, storage tanks, service connections, cross connections. What was a cross connection? Potable water, non-potable water.
You shouldn't have cross connections anyway.
Absolutely, they should be eliminated. Totally. Hydrant flush, and all of those things will be taken into consideration when choosing your plan. So make sure you have a good map of the distribution system and the location of where everything is. And then again, for we're picking sites that's representative of the various size mains, as well as farthest from the location of the production site. Okay? All right, we're going to make sure that we mark these sampling sites on our distribution map. We're going to have our routine sampling sites. We're going to have our repeat sampling sites. And again, we're going to be aware of where our daddy mains are, and as well as know where our trouble areas are. We have to give a narrative description of the plan, as well as a maintenance program associated with your sampling site. All of this must be submitted to your state agency and approved. Now, let's say I have submitted all of my routine sampling sites, and I'm using a customer home. That customer moves away. Can I change my sampling location now that the house is vacant? Yes, absolutely can, because we want to make sure that it's active. And in that case, that's where your alternate sampling sites come in. And you want to make sure that you are in contact with the state. Can I go to another site that's not on my sampling plan? No. Okay. If I do, I better make sure I have a good excuse for an explanation there. And one of the ways you can get around that is to set up sites within so many connections of whatever your sampling sites are, and that way you have more leeway if that is okay with your state agency, as opposed to giving a very descriptive direct address. So you'll check with them. As far as the narrative description of the plan, we want the water system's name and contact, the identification number, the water source, population served, the number of connection, as well as a description of the sample rotation within the community system. Maintenance program goes back to having that worksheet or the SOPs. It's going to lay out the minimum number of routine samples, the location of the routine sites, whereas if I'm out, someone else can step in and do the job. The sample collection schedule. Can anyone collect your BACT samples, or must they be certified in Rhode Island? Do they have to be certified to collect them? No. Okay. In some states, you have to be certified to fill those samples. Sample collection techniques, again, the SOPs, all of that should be a part of the maintenance program, as well as a part of the written plan there. A schedule for flushing the distribution system lines. Name and number of the people preparing the sampling plan and the date the plan was prepared. All of that must be submitted to the state and approved by the state. All right, they told you what representative active sites were, what sites were, let's say, better, which were not. Now, in Texas, we use outside faucet, which they pointed out may not be the best place to go. Why? Because a lot of times if they're too close to the ground, or insect infestation, or have the threads, if you're not properly choosing that site or disinfecting that faucet, it may cause you to have positive results. So you want to make sure that you're choosing carefully. Swivel type faucets with a single valve for hot and cold, not a good idea. Okay? Leaky faucets, not a good idea. Commercial sinks where they have all kinds of cleaning agents and janitorial mops and things like that, not a good idea, because you're increasing the possibility of coming back with a positive. Faucets too close to the ground with threads inside their spouts, where again, bacteria and other things can grow. Not a good idea. You want to make sure if it has an aerator to remove it. So make sure when you're choosing your sampling site, choose carefully. Okay? Because you don't want to cause a positive because of a bad thought out plan here. You can connect the tap directly to the distribution. You saw that in the film. That's an awesome idea. That puts you back in control of your sampling sites. Okay. So, sample procedures, you got your sample container. It must be a sterilized container. Many times the laboratory will give you that sterilized container. Make sure again it's intact and has not been opened. Usually they'll do the 125 ml plastic bottle. I know some people that still use the little whirly pack bag. Remember those from the old? Huh? Remember that? Yeah, way back then. In that sample container, there is a tablet or a powder, sodium thiosulfate. The purpose of the sodium thiosulfate was to why we dechlorinate it?
Because you don't want, you're not gonna get bugs if you've got chlorine in there.
It is a biological test, and we've just corrupted the test by having that nullifying agent chlorine in it. So we want to make sure that we neutralize the chlorine that's there. Do not rinse it out, because once you've rinsed out that neutralizing agent, then again, you may have just compromised your test. Okay, sample from the designated sites. Again, before the sampling, you want to make sure that you flush the lines. We're flushing the lines to make sure we have chlorinated water from the main. Do that till there's a temperature change, or you can wait for 2 to 3 minutes, time it to make sure based on where you're pulling that sample from. Then test for chlorine residual, okay? The reason we're testing for chlorine residual, because if you do disinfect with chlorine and there's no chlorine present, then there's a possibility that your sample will come back positive. Okay. But in a state like Rhode Island, where groundwater systems are not required to chlorinate, then you just want to make sure you're choosing carefully, flushing the lines to make sure any impurities have been knocked out, and then once that, go ahead and stream it back and pull your sample. In the old days, we used to disinfect the faucet. However, now they are saying that the amount of time it actually takes to properly disinfect the faucet will probably be an hour or so using bleach or hydrogen peroxide. How many of us are out there with that faucet soaking in something like that for that length of time? Now, we used to use the torch way back then. Can't do that with homeowners.
No, the DOH just came back with an SOP that they wanted us to stop using alcohol,
Okay.
70% that we were using, and go to non-fragrant chlorine bleach.
Non-fragrant.
Yeah, they didn't want any fragrance in it, springtime, whatever.
Oh,
Just
okay, that's
regular whatever
So you
bleach.
can buy, some type of thing.
And
So
they-
like, how is chlorine non-fragrant?
But then they also wanted to use Q-tips, dip it in there, sterilize the inside threads, more on the outside. And a lot of the things that we're lucky enough, they're the gooseneck style. So I actually just take the bloody bottle and stick it right up there and just hold it there for whatever, and that satisfies the requirement, I guess.
Okay.
And then off we go.
Okay. And again, if it's a part of your SOPs for your utilities, you want to stick with whatever they
That's what the
say.
state told us.
And so the recommendations here, if it's not what your state says, stick with whatever your state says. And if they want you to use that bleach for disinfection, by all means continue to do that, especially if it's working for you. But some other alternatives would be the bleach, the alcohol, hydrogen peroxide can also be used if you're looking for other alternatives that are out there for disinfection. So we then make sure we turn that faucet back again to a pencil-sized stream and collect the samples. Do not overfill it, but you want to make sure you are just a little above that 100 ml mark, maybe in the neck of the bottle. Complete the sampling form, state what type of sample it is. If it's a routine sample, you want to state as such. If I'm doing a new main, you want to make sure that you're putting that down, or if it's for construction, put that down also, so they don't count it in the wrong place. Send it to the laboratory. We have 30 hours to get it to the laboratory. It should be chilled to around 4 degrees. All right, violation. What constitutes a violation? We've already established what constitutes the acute as well as the non-acute violations. But your failure to select and submit routine samples are also considered a violation. If you exceed the total coliform maximum contaminant level, more than 40 samples monthly with greater than 5% of them positive, that's an acute violation. Less than 40, more than one positive, I can only have one if I have less than 40 samples, or it is a violation. So, proposed changes in all actualities, these are no longer proposed changes. They went into effect February of this year. What month are we in now? So they're no longer proposed. This is the rule now. So you may want to make that change in your book. This is the law. All right, under the new changes, your public water system vulnerable to microbial contamination must identify and fix the problem. No longer a suggestion or proposed change. Must establish criteria for systems to qualify and to stay on reduced monitoring. In other words, if you've had a crystal clean bill of health over the last year or so, you have to continuously demonstrate and qualify to continue that quarterly sample as opposed to the monthly sample. You must establish maximum contaminant level goals and limits for E. coli, and they've done that, as well as the new law eliminates the goal for total coliform, replacing it with a treatment technique. In other words, we're going to, put in corrective actions. So you no longer have to go through the process that you had to go with the total coliform. Mainly it's the E. coli fecal. All right, the other changes, the monitoring frequency will be linked to your system performance. So again, good system, no violation, monitoring frequency can be reduced, but that's something that you'll have to request. It also eliminates the monthly public notification for your total coliform positives. Because remember, those were non-fecal, we're looking at treatment techniques, as opposed to going through the ritual as we do with the acute violation. As of February this year, this is the law. Some of the health effects, or the reason why we are concerned with coliform of bacteria and viruses that may be out there, is because it does affect the health. Now, if you're a healthy individual, you probably can bounce back readily. But if you're very young or elderly or have a compromised immune system, then bacteria can affect you differently. Some of the general symptoms we exhibit or see would be diarrhea, cramps, nausea, and vomiting, but it could be very serious for those individuals with a weakened immune system. They go through the process of looking at various types of waterborne diseases outbreaks. Did you not know the War of 1812, and you can Google this, War of 1812, more people died from waterborne diseases than from actual gunshot wounds. Over 1,000 people died because of gunshot. More than 3,000 died because of the waterborne diseases. When you look at when Christopher Columbus came to the New World, 80% of those people were taken out because of waterborne diseases. So when you look at the number of people that died way back then and the number of actual deaths now that occur, the number has greatly dwindled. Why? Because of disinfection in a lot of cases. Best things in sliced bread. However, we have not gotten it down 100%. Pennsylvania had more than 5,000 cases, but these were not deaths, but people infected. In Texas, 1998, 1,400 people because of cryptosporidium. Milwaukee, 1993, over 400,000 affected, more than 100 deaths. Again, cryptosporidium. Matter of fact, I see cryptosporidium in Giardia quite a lot. What do we know about cryptosporidium? and Giardia.
Isn't cryptosporidium from like birds' guts or something like that?
Or cattle, warm-blooded organisms again, and usually you're looking at,
Well,
It's not hard to kill.
it's a very hard shell and very hard to kill
absolutely.
with using chlorine, yeah.
With using chlorine. So these are chlorine resistant. And because of that, we cannot just disinfect, but we have to do what? Filter, physically remove them out of the system there. What else is up here? So you can see again, even though this is after 1950, there are several cases where we've had a number of cases, but they're dwindling down as we go up the years, and in some cases, a few deaths. Ontario, again, about 1,400 were infected, 7 deaths, 2,000 E. coli. Washington County, New York, approximately 1,000 people to death, E. coli. Again, E. coli generally does not cause death, but keep in mind that it's used as one of the indicated organisms, so who knows what else is there. Haiti, 2010, how many people died? Cholera. Looking at over 6,000 people, 6,673 deaths because of cholera. But in that case, it was a total disintegration of their system because of earthquake. So you can see that it's still something pretty serious that we need to be aware of and to make sure that we're protecting our consumers. All right, for compliance, source water protection, first line of defense. In other words, when we pull those samples from the distribution system, if they come back positive, what the new law, coliform rule says, not only are we going back and testing the distribution system, you're also going to whatever source that's in production on that particular day, and guess what you're doing? You're pulling samples from those sources also. You want to make sure as far as source water protection, there's no source of contamination within 50 feet of a well. Absolutely nothing. Okay, treatment, you want to devise a treatment that will remove or inactivate the pathogen. It could be disinfection with chlorine, chlorine dioxide, ozone. It could be some type of filtration. You need to make sure that you come up with whatever can achieve the 99.99% inactivation of your viruses. And you'll have to prove that too. You need to look at the distribution system integrity. Part of it is maintaining adequate pressure. But what is adequate pressure? 35 psi? Absolutely. That is your minimum normal operating pressure. If it falls below 20, what happens? The possibility of other impurities, contaminants drawn within that line increase. And so we need to then fall into boil water and something to protect the public. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining adequate pressure to ensure the integrity of the system. If you're disinfecting with chlorine and your state has a minimum residual, you want to make sure that you're maintaining that. Now in Texas, our minimum residual free is 0.2, or if we're using a chloramine or a total, 0.5. And the other thing for the integrity of the distribution system is making sure that we're maintaining the distribution system. If that includes flushing on a monthly basis or more often if necessary, we need to do that, especially if we have large mains and very small or populations. You may have to implement some type of flushing. Monitoring and public awareness. Again, we're going to do the indicative organism monitoring, which is a coliform group. We're going to respond appropriately to positive samples, and we're going to notify the public. Okay? And notifying the public means that if it's an acute, I have 24 hours to get that information to them, whereas they can boil their water and make the decision to use an alternate source. If it's a non-acute, 30 days to let them know something still went wrong. Are there any questions, comments, concerns about the total coliform? or about sample collection, or where to pull the samples, or how often to pull the samples? None? All got it down pat? Clear as mud, huh?